Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a nice weekend. It's a beautiful day out there today and good forecast for the week. So, talk about several things today, and of course, we're going to take your questions. I'm going to talk about COVID to begin with. I'm going to talk about the school board, St. Louis Public School Board, for a minute. We're going to talk about some of the activities over the weekend in downtown and what we're going to do about them. So, beginning with COVID. We yesterday had 61 new cases in the city of St. Louis. Of course, we won't have today's new case numbers until a little bit later. Hospitalization numbers, 273. This has been a pretty consistent number for a couple of weeks now. And as I sometimes have called it, stubbornly too high. 75 people in the ICU, that's consistent for the last week or so, and 39 people on ventilators. The number of patients admitted day before yesterday was 32, and what that does is it brings our 7-day rolling average of admissions to 40, and this has been up and down between 39, 40, 41 over the last week or 10 days. Yesterday, there were 29 people discharged from the hospital. So, not getting worse, but not getting significantly better. A bit of a plateau is what it looks like right now. One of the things that I will mention here is that when we look back for the last 14 days, I showed you this map last week, one day, or maybe it was the week before, but the highest number of cases by zip code are now all in South St. Louis. 63116 has had for the last 2 weeks 101 cases. 63109 had 53, 63111 had 48, 63139, you all know what zip code you live in. These are all South St. Louis zip codes, had 50 cases. So this has shifted a bit to where most of the cases now, new cases in the last 14 days, are in South St. Louis. Fortunately, we've seen a bit of a drop in some of the North St. Louis zip codes, and the Central Corridor is sort of predictably right in between. North St. Louis zip codes went 17, 28, 22. So we have seen over the last month or so a real shift to an increase in the number of cases in South St. Louis. Now, I know you all probably know this or remember this. There are a number of testing sites. If you feel that you need to be tested or want to be tested, there are a number of testing sites in St. Louis. Our federally qualified health centers, as well as there are some urgent cares doing testing, and of course your own medical doctor or hospital. So encourage everyone just to continue to wear a mask, socially distance. That's so important. Wash your hands, take these preventative measures. You know that not quite a week ago we put in place some new restrictions for bars, restaurants, and large venues in St. Louis. Bars, restaurants have to close at 11 p.m. They have to operate at 50% capacity. Large venues have to operate at 50% capacity. Both of them have to wear masks, socially distance. The only exception to the mask is when you are sitting at your table eating dinner or drinking, not when you're up walking around chatting with people, etc. So this 11 o'clock closing time, I know it is tough for bars and restaurants, but it is really, we feel, necessary. One of the things that has occurred over the weekend is that Illinois, St. Clair County, our close counties in Illinois, also announced very similar restrictions that are going to go into effect this week. Their bars will be closing at 11 o'clock, and they will have a 25% capacity. Reception halls are closed. no party buses, that sort of thing. So they specifically said that this 11 o'clock closing time, they were trying to make that consistent with St. Louis. I think that's great because we know, even though that Mississippi is big, we are very fluid society, and folks are back and forth across the two. So in this region, we're all in this together, and so it's great. And I commend County Executive Mark Kern in St. Clair County, and for adopting these measures as well. Make it a little bit easier. Let me talk to you a minute about the school board. So, school board, St. Louis Public Schools, is independent from the city of St. Louis. But so the school board has its own elected board. These are citywide elected members, 7 members. And but when there's a vacancy on the school board, in a kind of unusual thing, in state law, when there's a vacancy, the mayor appoints someone to fill that vacancy for the remainder of the term. And so about 6 weeks ago or so, an individual who had been elected last April of 2019, so a little more than a year ago, it was necessary for her to resign. When she resigned, then it fell to me to appoint someone to the school board. So on Friday, I'm pleased to announce that I appointed Miss Regina Fowler to the school board. She is going to be really an excellent choice. Regina, Miss Fowler, is a CPA. She has extensive business experience, but most importantly, she cares deeply about kids and about the education that they get. She's an adjunct professor at Harris Stowe, and just has a really solid and very impressive background from her. She's lived in St. Louis all her life. And so at any rate, I appointed Miss Regina Fowler to the school board last Friday. So I wanted to let everyone know that, and I think she'll be a great addition to the board. Now, lastly, before we take your questions, several recent weekends, and this weekend was one of them, downtown has seen a lot of cruising, a lot of speed, drag racing, cars on vacant surface parking lots doing wheelies and donuts and squealing their tires, and sometimes firing off weapons. And it's just really a very untenable situation. It is not acceptable. Our police department has been working hard. Our street department has been working hard. We have made some changes over the summer. Some of you will know about them. For example, we made some changes on the riverfront. We've made some changes on South Broadway. Nevertheless, this problem is continuing to move around, and we are going to make more changes this week. We are going to we're considering closing some of the surface parking lots. These are privately owned lots for the most part, or maybe all. We're considering closing them because it is a requirement of the city that when a surface lot is not in operation, it has to be secured. And if you don't have a gate or a fence or a barrier in some way, it's not possible for you to secure that lot, so we will likely help them with that. We are also looking at making some traffic flow changes downtown in order to cause people not to have a long stretch where they can drive too fast, carelessly, recklessly, and really torment the residents who live downtown. There are some 10,000 residents who live downtown. This kind of racing and dangerous behavior is not acceptable for the residents who live here, not acceptable for the businesses that are here. And so we are going to continue to try to address that by making some more changes. I'm sure some of those changes will be inconvenient for some folks who are used to driving a particular route, and I'm sorry about that. But this is something that we have to get under control. You probably saw that there was a bad car accident. It was a car and a truck, a pickup truck, last night on Washington Avenue. It was reported that the car was driving very, very fast. One individual, all 4 individuals were ejected or thrown from the car. One has passed away. The others are in the hospital. This behavior cannot continue. So our police department has a lot to do. They are dealing with a lot of violence. 169, I think, is the accurate number. 169 homicides to date. That's a third more than in prior years. Of course, there's been a lot of other civil unrest going on that our police department has been dealing with, but they are also dealing with downtown. This is also violence that's occurring, and they will continue to do that. That, I guess, is primarily what I wanted to say about downtown. You will be seeing some changes. The other thing I guess I want to say is that many of the folks that are doing this reckless driving don't even live in the city of St. Louis. You know, they're coming in from other parts of the region. I'm sure they consider this fun. This is too dangerous. It's not acceptable in a downtown area. And you know, it has been made a little bit easier unfortunately easier by the fact that downtown, many offices have been closed for the last 5 months, and some are reopened, but still have a lot of people working from home. You have a lot of bars, restaurants that are not operating, and after 11, they have to be closed right now, so that takes even some more people off the street. It's a double-edged sword here, and so we're working our hardest to make sure that that there are changes here, because this kind of fast driving and reckless behavior is not acceptable. So with that,
questions?
Any questions?
So starting on the topic of COVID-19, a question from Gregory today, Mayor, wants to know your thoughts on why you think we've seen a reverse trend and now more cases happening in South St. Louis.
You know, truthfully, I don't know that exact answer, Gregory, but you know, initially we had a disproportionate number of cases in North St. Louis, and maybe the communication got through and people began being more careful. It's hard to say when you're talking about human behavior here. We do know that many of our cases, around close to 50% of our cases are among 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. So is that related to geography of where they live? It's hard to know that for sure. But the point really is this: COVID's everywhere in our community. We cannot let our guard down. We cannot, you know, go back to the old normal, although we all wish we could. I do too. But we just can't, because COVID is too prevalent in our community. So.
Question from Erica: what are the numbers that you're looking at to open us all the way back up, or the numbers you're looking at to close us all the way back down?
So Erica, I know everybody wants to know what's the magic number, but really this is about looking at trends and about looking at what those trends look like. So we certainly are always looking at hospitalizations, number of people in ICU, number of people on ventilators, number of admissions, new admissions to the hospital. So that's one sort of set of data that's related. The other data piece that's very important is how many new cases do we have. The number of new cases we've had has been, all of these numbers really have been very stubborn over the last couple of weeks. And so when we can begin, I'll say when in a very positively, when we begin to see these numbers really go down and stay down, then we'll be able to ease up a bit on some of these restrictions that are in place. Or when we have a vaccine, of course. I don't know when that will be. I am just like you. I read the papers, I listen to the news. I know everyone is anxiously hoping that having a vaccine will be soon. There are some in test phases. So it'll be a combination of getting these numbers down and or having a vaccine.
So still on COVID-19, Devin's question is, how is the testing backlog? Are we getting results back in a reasonable amount of time?
Good question, Devin. So looking at last week, the 7-day period, there were 430 new cases in the city of St. Louis. Most of them, let me count these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Almost all of them were from 1 to 12 days. A good portion of them were in a week, 6 or 7 days. So yes, last week looked better than the prior week, for sure. And so it's improving. It's not where it needs to be, though. So that's the reason that we've encouraged anyone who has a test to self-quarantine until you get that test result. Presumably, or in many cases, you had a test because maybe you had some symptoms, or maybe you really just needed to know. So self-quarantine until you get the test results is our advice. I know that's hard. It's hard advice to take. But you don't want to be out and about if it turns out that your test does come back positive. So try to self-quarantine.
So a question from Bo, you've talked about things closing regionally at 11 p.m. Is there something that makes the virus more dangerous after 11 p.m. and before things open up the next day?
No, but thank you for asking me that question, because I've gotten a lot of comments on social media, kind of like, oh yeah, well the virus only happens after 11, but you know that's not the case. What it amounts to is when you get large groups of people who are socializing versus having dinner at a table with a small group. That socializing, if somebody in that group is positive, and maybe they know it, maybe they don't, but especially if they don't, they could be a super spreader. And it is really just the activity that you're involved in when you're in a big group of people, and that generally tends to happen more later at night.
COVID-related question from Tanya. Where is the $5.4 million for housing, rental, and mortgage assistance?
Where is it?
Where
physically?
is it?
I hope it's in the bank.
It's
I'm
in some
sure it
people's
is.
pockets.
I'm sure it is. Yes, it was just a little less than a week ago. The $5.4 million, for those of you who don't know, is the amount of CARES Act funding that the city allocated to help with rental and mortgage assistance for those people who could not pay their rent or mortgage because they were laid off or their hours were reduced because of COVID. And so if you're behind on your rent because you got laid off or your hours were reduced because of COVID, you couldn't pay your rent, or now we take into account whether or not you got federal unemployment and state unemployment and the stimulus money. All of that, hopefully, many people used to pay their rent or to pay part of their rent. So that $5.4 million, though, is for those people who could not pay their rent as a result of COVID. We are working with more than a dozen, I think it's close to 15 or 16 agencies we're taking the application. The applications are then they are then assigned to an agency such as Catholic Charities, St. Patrick's Center, Gateway 1-8, such as one of those agencies. And those agencies then process the application. If they deem that you'll have to submit more information. If they deem that the application it warrants help with paying the rent, then they will contact that landlord. They will try to help mediate or negotiate with that landlord, and the funds will be directly paid to the landlord. The point of this is to keep you out of the eviction process, keep the individual out of the eviction process. So that $5.4 million is To say that it's gone is not right, because all of it has not been processed yet. But we know that we have enough applications that it will use up that $5.4 million. That's why on Wednesday of this week, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we have a Board of Estimate and Apportionment meeting, and I am asking the Board of E&A to allocate another $2 million towards that process.
So a COVID and school-related question from Jenny. Where are there or other places in the city where kids will be able to go during the day that are free and will accommodate socially distanced learning?
So St. Louis Public Schools has instructional support centers in the schools where kids who have opted to do this distance learning but at school, if that makes sense, there will be some supervision there, there will be some tutoring there, some folks to help those kids. They will still be doing distance learning, and they will be doing individual learning, as I understand it, but they can be at school. Their bus can also pick them up. So if you go to St. Louis Public Schools, that is that's the location, and there are a number of them across the city. And you will, if you're a parent, you'll be notified of that. So that's what kids need to do. Now, other kids who are doing totally distance learning from home, it's my I mean, those kids need to check in, they need to be on their computer, they need to be doing their homework, and so they need to really be at home doing that, or wherever, maybe it's a babysitter's or something like that, but not at school.
So we have some questions about voting and elections and the post office, Mayor. Stephen's question is, what are you doing to make sure that my mail-in ballot will be received and counted?
Well, let me just say this. God save the post office. Now, to a serious answer to your question. It is, what's the date, Jacob, that you can apply?
Starting
tomorrow?
Monday.
Oh, okay. A week from today, you can apply for mail-in or absentee ballot through the election board. So that will give you a little over 2 months in order to receive the ballot from the election board, fill out the ballot, get the ballot back in the mail. So one, what am I doing to make sure? I'm sure it will be counted. If it gets to the election board, it will be counted. Our election board is an excellent election board, and they will count all of them. The question is it going to get there? Please, give it a week. Give it 2 weeks if you know who and how you're going to vote, who you're going to vote for and how you're going to vote, to get that back in the mail. Now, the other thing I would say is that in-person voting, there are, and if you voted in person a week ago, so a week ago, 2 weeks ago, in August, you saw all of the provisions that the election board has in place to make sure that in-person voting is safe. And that includes, you have to wear a mask, it includes hand sanitizer, it includes not reusing pens and pencils and that sort of thing. So in-person voting, we feel, is safe with the precautions that the election board has put in place. But if you want to vote absentee or mail-in, please give it some time. We know, I mean, you can't turn on the news today or open up the internet without seeing all the stories about the post office. So it's important, certainly in my view, that the post office continue to operate and be able to deliver the mail on time.
So Barry's question, somewhat related to this, why can't the city just have a Dropbox or a place where a properly executed ballot is just dropped off throughout the city, like distribution sites?
Whose question was that?
Barry.
Barry. Great question. When I first saw this, I don't know, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I spoke with our election board about that because I think it's a fabulous idea. It's, if you haven't seen it, it's a box, big metal locked secure box. That's boxes that are placed around the city in convenient locations, and in some states you can just slide your ballot into that box. Well, not in Missouri, because in Missouri we don't allow those boxes. And I think, you know, that ought to be on all of our to-do lists, and it'll be on mine for sure in the next legislative session. But we did inquire about that, because it is a great idea, and there are a number of states who do it, and there are no problems. It's no different than putting your ballot in a mailbox, for goodness sake. Except that you're putting it in just a box that only the election board would pick up. Our state law doesn't allow that, I'm sorry to say.
You have a few more questions and a few more minutes.
Okay?
So regarding downtown, Mayor, Lindy's question is, has the city considered any sort of curfew, maybe at midnight, to curb some of the behavior downtown?
So Lindy, curfews are a really interesting subject. I've had several people write to me and ask for a 9 p.m. curfew. It's my understanding, this is a legal interpretation, that if we were to put in a curfew, it would have to be citywide. And if we're going to put in a curfew, we have to be able to enforce it, of course. And so we have talked about it. At this point in time, we're not prepared to do that citywide, although the idea has some merit.
And then the final question from Jill, related to crime and violence. Has the city considered having a gun buyback program?
Hi, Jill. I don't know if, I've had a couple of emails about this. We did have a gun buyback program. It's been about 2 years ago by now, I think. And we'd have to find the funding. It's pretty expensive to do it. I mean, I'm talking a couple $100,000 probably, to have a gun buyback program. The real question is whether or not it would be effective in really reducing the number of guns on the street. You know, Missouri has almost no gun laws. Almost anyone can carry a gun anywhere, anytime, without any permit and without any training. And it is, frankly, a very big impediment to our ability to do policing, because unless you are a convicted felon, you can carry an AK, an AR, a whatever gun anywhere, anytime. And it makes policing extremely challenging, extremely challenging. And so a gun buyback program is something that we did do a couple of years ago, and it's something we're considering right now. But we don't have one on the books at this time.
It's 2:30. That's all the time we have, Mayor.
It's 2:30. That's it. Our time is up. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll be back and talk with you on Wednesday. And have a good week. Thanks.